Losing control over deals sucks. Same goes when they slip and then you have to try to save the quarter by waving around discounts. If you've ever found yourself in this situation, keep watching and you'll learn how to run a discovery call that maxes out both your win rates and deal size while enabling you to close the deal when you've committed it to your manager. In this video, we're going to cover how to structure a discovery call, going through it in detail, and then what are the top 5 mistakes I've seen being made that you should avoid at all costs. In a future video, we'll cover what are the most common objections that you should be prepared for in a discovery call and how to overcome them. There are always 4 parts to a discovery call. First of all, you prep, because you either prepare or prepare to fail. Second is the opener, to set the stage and manage expectations. Then you run the discovery call. And finally, you close the call in a way that keeps the op moving. When preparing for a discovery call, you want to keep it light. There's nothing worse than over-preparing and coming into a call full of assumptions. There are usually 3 things I prepare for. Who are the personas? Who's joining, what do they do, and what do they care about? What competing solution are they using today, and how do we stack up against them? And then just going through the different use cases that we normally solve for customers. Because the more use cases you can uncover during the discovery call, the bigger your deal value will get. Opening the call should be short and sweet. All you want to do is get alignment and manage expectations. ACE is one of the acronyms that helps you cover the basics. It stands for appreciate, check end time, and end goal. A quick example could look like, hey Matt, I appreciate you jumping on the call today. We booked for 30 minutes. Do you have a hard stop after that? Okay, cool. You mentioned that you wanted to cover ABC by the end of this call. I thought that it would benefit us to go over XYZ as well. Is there anything else you would add to the agenda? We made Matt feel valued, we put him at ease because now he knows how long this call is going to take, and we aligned on what we're going to discuss so it's valuable for everyone. Another thing I like doing is having everyone on the call introduce themselves. You want to understand who is responsible for what and what do they care about. This comes in really handy. Some time ago we were renewing a customer where all 4 contacts we were in touch with left the company and there was only 2 months left until the renewal. The new team wasn't too familiar with our solution and they had alternatives, but by getting to know them on what they care about, we were able to set them up for success and retain them as a customer. That's it for setting the stage. Now let's check out the blueprint that we'll use to conduct the discovery call itself. The goal of any discovery is to collect all the information that you'll need to sell bigger, faster, and with higher certainty. I used to be a huge fan of HubSpot's GPCT model, which stands for goal, plan, challenges, and timeline. But I found that the SPICE framework from the Winning by Design team is a way more fluid approach and makes the conversation feel natural. It's also more thorough. SPICE stands for situation, pain, impact, critical event, and decision criteria. And it sets the flow of the call so the conversation builds up in a logical order. To keep things easy to follow, we'll go over how to uncover each of these areas first, and then dive into what are the top 5 mistakes I've seen being made and how to avoid them. You can tackle these areas one by one, asking the customer questions about their situation, their pain, what is the impact that they're looking for, etc. But personally, I like to cast a wider net that allows the customer to start with what's on their mind. My go-to question is, can you tell me a bit about your current situation, what challenges you're facing, and what the ideal end goal looks like? Whatever they answer, I can trust that that's their main priority. If they're reluctant to share or perceive that everything is going fine, you can educate them on what their peers are up to as a way to have them open up. An example could look like this. Typically when I talk to persona, they're trying to accomplish X, Y, or Z. Does either of these line up with what your priorities are right now? After this, you can drill down into each specific area to create a need. If you're enjoying the video, do me a favor and smash that like button so I know you made it this far, and make sure to subscribe to have similar sales tips coming your way each week. Now let's take a look at how to drill down into each point of SPICED. To get an understanding of the customer's situation, you can ask questions like, how are you doing XYZ today? What tools are you using to do that? How many team members do you have right now? And are you planning to grow this year? Situational questions can even give you an idea of what the scope of your land is going to be and if there's any room for expansion later on. When we're done with that, we can progress over to pain. A couple of examples could look like, you mentioned the goal of X. What are the things holding you back from achieving it? What are absolutely critical and what are minor nuances? What have you tried so far and how did they turn out? Situation and pain are usually easier to uncover because the prospect is living it day to day. Unless, of course, they don't perceive any issues, in which case you can go back to educating them on what others are doing. Before you start talking about impact, it's really important to make the customer feel heard. An easy way to do this is to summarize what you've heard so far in your own words and ask if you got it right. This also builds rapport with the customer and makes them feel that they're better off with you than without you. When talking about impact, You want to keep your ears open for anything with a dollar value attached to it. It can be increasing revenue, decreasing cost, or improving customer experience, which reduces churn. Note that the impact can be fourfold. It can be positive, like reaching a new goal that then leads to more revenue. It can be negative, which is essentially their cost of inaction. It can be on an individual level, like getting a promotion if you successfully implement a solution, or it can be a company level, like getting into a new market if we deliver on time. The better you understand what's the impact as a whole, the better your chances of winning. Good questions to ask here can be, last time this mentioned pain happened, how did it trickle down to the rest of the company? And okay, granted that you're able to overcome these challenges, what will that enable you to do? But one of the best ways to bridge the conversation from pain to impact is by telling a customer's story. It can go something like this. Your use case reminds me of Dan at HighCorp. Dan and his team were struggling with XYZ, which was causing negative impact. With our product, after time passed, they were able to get to solution, which resulted in positive impact. Are you trying to do something similar here as well? The words you're looking for is "that's right," or have them clarify, and then you'll have a better understanding of what the impact is that they're looking for. It's super important that you do this right, because this will define how much you can ask for your solution in a way that they still buy it. Now we're ready to uncover the critical event, which will allow us to create and maintain urgency throughout the sales cycle. The critical event is something specific that will happen in the near future that has negative consequences attached to that should they fail to get the impact by that deadline. Some questions that help you uncover the critical event are: when do you need to get this solved by? Why is that date important to you? What happens if you don't have a solution by then? This information is absolutely crucial for driving urgency throughout the sales cycle and having confidence in when the deal is going to close. One of my favorite closing techniques is called the reverse timeline, wherein you take the customer from the point of implementation all the way back to today and defining all the things that you have to do to get there. But you can only do that if you have the decision-making process and criteria nailed down. To find out what their decision-making process looks like, you can ask questions like, how have you bought tools like this in the past? Or if they don't know where to start, you can guide them by saying, typically, for companies like yours, we have to take care of XYZ before we can make a purchase. Is the process similar at your end? As for the decision makers, you'll want to find out who are the technical buyers and who are the economic buyers. And while it's really tempting to ask, who's going to make the decision, you want to avoid this at all cost. Instead, try asking questions like, who would feel left out if we didn't include them in the project? Or who could kill this project if they really wanted to? And that's the SPICE model for you. I think it's pretty straightforward and easy to follow, but let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Now, even though we have a fancy framework in place, it's still going to take a ton of practice until we make it seem effortless. But instead of focusing on all the things that we could do right, let's see what are the top 5 mistakes that if you avoid, you can knock it out of the park. The mistake that's probably easiest to fall into is pitching right after you uncover just enough pain points. The problem with this is that you won't be able to solve the customer's use case because you'll just be scratching the surface. Not only that, but because by pitching before the customer feels heard, you're also making mistake number 2, not building rapport. Fail to build rapport with a customer and they're not going to trust you. The way to avoid this mistake is to show the customer that you understand their situation, and better yet, if you have helped others like them in the past. In other words, you have to make the customer feel like they're better off with you than without you. Make this mistake and the prospect will go silent as soon as they get the info they need, leaving you with no way of influencing the decision. Mistake number 3 is stopping before you've uncovered the critical event. But it's not like reps do this on purpose. Most of the time it comes down to mistaking the impact or pain for the critical event. Other times the prospect may tell you that there is no timeline and you don't drill down with further disco questions. Questions like, okay, so why are we talking about this now and not 3 months down the line? So what happens if everyone just goes back to their day-to-day and does nothing about it? Or is solving this tied to any of your OKRs? If you don't find out the critical event, you'll get ghosted or at the very least lose control over the project timeline because your follow-ups will be generic or along the lines of nagging. And even if you do win against a competitor, it's going to come down to blind luck. Now, in some cases, the customer doesn't have a critical event, but that's because they're either window shopping or just preparing a contingency plan for something that may never happen. This is rarely the case, however, so don't be afraid to drill down. Mistake number 4 is not involving at least 5 stakeholders from the customer side. Gong statistics show that both deal value and win rates go up with the number of stakeholders involved in the project. In my experience, you need at least 5 stakeholders from the buyer side to maintain a grip on things. If you keep to just 1 or 2 contacts, you'll be forced to single thread. This limits your understanding of the scope of the project, and that'll be reflected in the deal value. You might even find that there was never a real need in the first place. I remember in the early days working on this project for 6 months, only to find out that the economic buyer was someone from another department who said tackling this problem would create more headaches than it solves, so they never made the purchase. Have you subscribed yet? Before we move on to how to close a discovery call, let's check out the last mistake on the list, which is not discussing price on the first call. Now you're in luck because most buyers actually want to discuss pricing on the first call, but if they don't, it's your responsibility to bring it up. Discussing the budget at least within a range is a really good way of managing expectations. It also helps us understand whether the prospect is serious about buying or they're just window shopping. We're almost done. What matters in the end is that we have a mutual action plan in place before we leave the call. Set aside 5 minutes at the end of the call to discuss clear ownership. Who does what by when? Again, taking a look at Gong statistics, you'll see that win rates tend to go up 20% if you discuss next steps throughout the sales cycle. By having dated next steps on the call that the prospect agreed to, you have a reason to follow up and not be labeled as pushy. And the better you're able to tie next steps to the critical event, the more you'll be able to drive urgency throughout the sales cycle. And there you have it. Like and subscribe if you found this video useful, and check out some of my other content which will appear on either side. See you next week.